for the reason. I still say 2010s, best era of basketball, specifically for the fact the skill level now isn't far over from what we've seen in the 2010s. Like, I'm going to give you an example. When you compare the 80s to the 2010s, the skill level at which players were developed and the individual skill level that guys had in 2010s are way better than what guys had in the 80s, just because the evolution of basketball. But even when you look at the 90s, there's a lot of great guys in the 90s. I want to give them their respect as well. But when you compare the individual talent to the guys in the 2010s, I'm taking the guys in the 2010s just because they had more developed skill due to the evolution of basketball. Same with the 2000s. 2000s was very skilled, but I think a lot of that compared to the 2010s, the guys in the 2010s still had it on lock. And even now, even though I keep saying the evolution of basketball, that's just the way it goes and stuff. Now I feel like there's a lot of talented guys, but the IQ is lacking from what we've seen from guys in the 2010s. I feel like in 2010s, there was a lot of great players, and there was a lot of great players in their prime at that moment. So their understanding of the game was a lot better than what we see from a lot of young guys now. So there's a bunch of talent. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's shooting threes, but there's less IQ and there's less there's less IQ being played as a team and as individual guys who have that talent compared to, the 2010s, where there was a lot of young talent on the rise, KD, Harden, Westbrook, but there was also that well sauteed class of Kobe. You had Paul Pierce, you had Bron, you had D Wade, you had Shaq in the early. He was on his way. But I mean, you get what I'm saying. You had a lot of guys. Dirk, as Paul Gasol, you had so many sauteed guys who still had that great balance. Again, Melo, T-Mac, like Vince Carter. You had so many guys who already reached that point of maturity, having a better understanding of the game from when they were young, and being able to go ahead and implement that into the team they were playing with and also their individual game. So I say 2010s, man, because as of now, the skill level is great, but the IQ hasn't developed and matured enough to surpass what we've seen in the 2010s.
Yeah, man. I honestly thought you were going to say a different era. I'm proud of you, man, because I was thinking maybe he was going to say a different era, but we think alike. Yeah, I agree with you. I got the 2010s as well, because what we've seen, from 2010s on to now, we've really seen, so many special things in the NBA, starting off with, super teams. I understand some people are against teams, but the super teams that we got to witness really revolutionized how the game is played today.
Yeah.
You talk about the three with the Heat, LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, how they were created because there was a super team with the Celtics, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo.
Oh. Got the Spurs, Warriors,
Spurs.
After their guys, the young OKC with Kevin Durant, Westbrook, Harden, Warriors dynasty that's still living on. The Cavs of LeBron, Kevin Love, and Kyrie. We got to see some really special teams that I really think if you match some of them teams that we just said up to the teams that were in the 90s, there's going to be some problems. A lot of people want to talk about it, but if the 2017 Warriors were to see the 96 Bulls, I think you know what I'm going to say. The Warriors will win that series. 2017. I think so too, just because it's the skill level, man, the skill level and the ability that guys are able to do. And I'm not going to say it'd be a sweep or nothing like that. I'm sure it'd go to 7 games. That Bulls team was amazing. That was actually phenomenal. And then ultimately, too, you got to take and play the eras. That's, it's going to be played. And it's going to be played with the rules from the 90s. It's going to be played with the rules from 2017, because a lot of things that people don't know is during the 90s, you had to keep your hand above the ball. It was like a carry or travel if you put it on the side or under. So that's something that comes into play too, because now we see a bunch of guys, we see everybody carry every play now. So that changes that matchup too. So kudos to all the other eras. But I think, like you said, man, some of these super teams was magnificent, man, through the 2010s era. It was crazy.
Yeah, and then another reason why I think that's the best era was because of how competitive the playoffs really were. I mean, until Kevin Durant went to the Warriors, obviously, but everything that we saw from the playoffs, the Eastern Conference, Western Conference Finals, the finals, they were all competitive during the 2010s, and there were some upsets that occurred, like the big one, the Mavericks over the Heat in 2011.
Yeah.
Big one with Kawhi, I think, in 2019, with the Raptors beating the Warriors. So we got some really good finals, some good upsets, some good NBA stories that were really in the history books in the NBA today. And I think witnessing history, we witnessed a lot of history from the 2010s up till now, because now we've seen LeBron James become the all-time scorer, passing Kareem, something that took 39, nearly 40 years to accomplish. We saw Russell Westbrook become the triple double king, having the most double all time. And then Steph Curry becoming the all time having the 3-point record. So
Danny Green did it at one point too.
Yeah.
In the playoffs, Danny Green that had a record. Klay Thompson broke a record, and Steph Curry. Like, it was a lot of different changes that we witnessed throughout the game too. So that's just to add to the point that you was mentioning as well.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, like we were talking, like you said about the handles and going on with the 90s, the game has really revolutionized for the better because obviously the game is set for you to score. The game is set for you to have bigger opportunities to have historic performances now. And that's what we're seeing in the NBA today compared to what the 90s was. It was nearly, if you're not Michael Jordan, it was nearly impossible to see somebody have a 60-point performance, 70-point performance. Now this is coming like a regular occurrence that we see in the NBA now because the game is more recognized for you to score. I think that brings more entertainment. I mean, yes, our era does lack the physical defense that the 90s had of how they were called fouls and things like that. I think that kind of takes away from the factor. But still, I would rather take the scoring more than the hard physical defense. I would like to see games more competitive because of how you can see a big man, a center, pop threes now. That seemed nearly impossible in the 90s era or the early 2000s era. So I think from the 2010s and on, I think this was the best era of NBA basketball for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely rolling with 2010s, man. I think they had a lot of discipline that traveled over from the 90s. And also, too, they had their own flavor of new school basketball. So it was like, all right, we taking this from the OGs that we seen from Mike, Bird, Magic, Isaiah. Then you had the development of young guys in there to add that little extra flair, like, oh, this is what the league is developing to. But the Saute guys, like I mentioned, the Kobe's, the Paul Pierce, the Tim Duncans, the KDs as he developed, the Bronze, like those guys were like, all right, we played in this older era, and now it's our era. And it's like, all right, cool, let's add our own flavor to it. Let's keep developing the game. And I think they did an amazing job at that, man, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. All right, so we'll move on to the final segment. We're going to share our top 5 tournament events we want to see during NBA free agency. So I guess we'll work our way from 5 to 1. So go ahead and take your time with this. You can start at 5, I'll start at 5, and then we can work our way down. So what is number 5 for you, your list?
All right, I'm going to just show the hat off first off, man. All right, this is the real hometown. I know I'm in Chicago, but this is the real hometown. All right, so you said what?
Is that the Tigers hat,